Have you ever wondered where your thoughts come from? That constant voice in your head commenting on everything, judging, worrying, and planning. Is it really you creating those thoughts? What if I told you that thinking isn't what you think it is? That instead of actively creating thoughts, you're actually receiving them, like a radio picks up signals? This revelation changed everything for me, and today I will show you why the thoughts in your head might not even be yours. The myth of mental control. We assume we control our thoughts, that we produce them deliberately, like choosing items off a menu. You think about lunch, and food-related ideas appear. You plan your weekend, and activities come to mind. But if you're truly in charge, why can't you stop unwanted thoughts? Why do random memories or worries interrupt when you're trying to focus? Try this. Sit quietly and attempt not to think. Within moments, thoughts flood in. Childhood memories, tomorrow's tasks, or that awkward thing you said last week. Here's why. Harvard neuroscientists found that 95% of cognition happens subconsciously. This means most mental activity occurs beneath your awareness, shaping your thoughts before you even notice them. Your conscious mind isn't the sole decision maker. It's more like a passenger observing the ride. This explains why your thoughts often contradict your intentions. You might want to feel confident before a presentation, yet doubts creep in. You try to sleep, but your mind replays stressful scenarios. If you were truly authoring these thoughts, you'd only create helpful ones. Instead, it feels like watching a channel you didn't choose, and you're unable to change the programming. Consider meditation. You focus on your breath, determined to stay present. Then thoughts about work or an unpaid bill arise. You gently return to breathing, but the cycle repeats. This isn't you thinking, it's you receiving thoughts. The harder you try to control them, the more they resist, like trying to calm turbulent water by pressing on it. So, if you're not creating these thoughts, where do they come from? Recognizing thoughts as signals passing through rather than personal creations changes everything. Some may stem from past experiences, others from external influences, or even deeper layers of consciousness. Instead of battling your thoughts, why am I thinking this? You can step back and observe them. Neuroscience supports this. Brain scans show that most mental activity happens automatically, with conscious awareness lagging behind. This explains why insights often feel like they appear out of nowhere during a walk or shower. If thoughts are transmissions, the real power lies in choosing which ones to engage with. You can't stop the signals, but you can adjust your receiver, tuning out static like fears or worries, and focusing on clarity, intuition, and presence. Your mind as a cosmic radio. Imagine your mind isn't generating thoughts, but receiving them, like a radio picking up different stations. Ancient mystics described consciousness as a vast field, and modern physicists now explore similar ideas. The Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab found that the brain's electromagnetic field interacts with environmental energy, suggesting our thoughts might not be isolated creations, but signals we tune into. Think about those moments when a solution suddenly pops into your head, like when you're in the shower, not actively trying to solve anything, and the answer arrives. That's your brain shifting frequencies, pulling in a clear signal from the noise. Your focus and beliefs act as the tuning dial. When you're relaxed, you might catch higher frequencies, creative insights, intuitive nudges. You're more likely to pick up static, repetitive worries, and old fears when stressed. But why do some thoughts feel foreign, like they don't belong to you? If your mind is a receiver, negative thoughts might be interference from lower frequencies. It's like driving through a tunnel. Your favorite station cuts out, replaced by garbled noise. The signal was always there, but conditions changed what you could hear. Similarly, exhaustion or stress might tune you into mental static rather than clear channels. Research shows that sudden inspirations, those aha moments, often correlate with gamma brainwave activity and are linked to heightened awareness. This suggests breakthrough ideas aren't manufactured through effort, but received when the mind is in the right state. Meditation, deep focus, or even mundane activities like showering can create the conditions for clearer signals to come through. Here's the key takeaway. If thoughts are broadcasts, you're not responsible for everyone that passes through. A radio doesn't create the songs it plays, it picks them up. A thought like, "I'm not good enough" might not be yours, but a frequency you've habitually tuned into, shaped by past experiences or external influences. The good news? Studies on neuroplasticity show that focused attention can strengthen certain neural pathways, training your receiver to favor positive frequencies. Practicing gratitude, for instance, can make uplifting thoughts more accessible, like presetting a radio to your favorite station. Mindfulness, then, isn't about stopping thoughts, it's about becoming a better listener. By observing thoughts without attachment, you gain the power to choose which ones deserve your attention. The many voices in your head. That voice in your head isn't a single narrator, it's more like a crowded conference call. Imagine you're deciding whether to take a leap on a new project. One voice says, "This could be amazing, go for it." Another chimes in, "What if you fail? Play it safe." A third quietly suggests, "You've done something like this before, trust yourself." These voices represent distinct thought patterns. The critical voice that nitpicks, the fearful voice that imagines worst-case scenarios, and the intuitive voice that offers subtle guidance. Each has its own tone and agenda, and they don't always agree. The brain tends to default to familiar patterns. When you hear thoughts like, "I'm not good at this," or "this won't work," they often echo past conditioning, messages from parents, teachers, or society that have carved deep neural grooves. These repetitive thoughts can feel loud and urgent, but are not always reliable. In contrast, original insights often arrive quietly, slipping in like a whisper. A study on creative problem-solving found that breakthrough ideas rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They're easily drowned out by louder, habitual thoughts. Fear-based voices dominate because they're wired for survival. The amygdala processes threats milliseconds faster than the rational brain, which means anxious thoughts grab your attention even when they're irrational. Intuition, on the other hand, works differently. It doesn't argue or shout. The sudden clarity feels complete, even without explanation. Research on expert decision makers shows that in high-pressure moments, the best choices often come from this non-analytical space. To distinguish these voices, replay a recent mental debate. Maybe you were deciding whether to start a project or have a difficult conversation. Notice which voice used absolutes, like "this always happens," and which stayed open, saying, "What if we tried something different?" The rigid, repetitive thoughts are usually conditioned signals, while the flexible, curious ones often indicate deeper wisdom. The key is learning to listen selectively. When fear shouts, they'll reject you. Intuition might quietly suggest, "Say it anyway." Over time, you'll notice which voices leave you feeling small and which expand your sense of possibility. The next section explores how shifting this perspective changes everything. Breaking the identification spell. What if you didn't have to believe every thought that crosses your mind? Mindfulness research reveals a radical truth. Thoughts are events you experience, not who you are. Studies from Yale University show that over-identifying with thoughts activates the default mode network, the brain's self-referential circuitry. This explains why a thought like "I'm unworthy" can feel so real. It's not because it's true, but because your brain treats it as part of your identity. Think of your thoughts like clouds drifting across the sky. They appear, shift, and disappear without altering the sky itself. A dark cloud doesn't mean the sky is broken, just as an angry thought doesn't mean you're inherently angry. Yet we often treat thoughts as if they define us. When the mind says, "You'll fail," we react as though it's a verdict rather than a passing signal. This misidentification creates suffering. For example, waking up anxious might make you think, "I am anxious," merging your identity with the feeling. But neuroscience suggests a different perspective. You're the awareness noticing anxiety, not the anxiety itself. In one study, participants who practiced detachment, reframing thoughts as "I'm having the thought that I'm anxious," showed reduced emotional brain activity compared to those who fused with their thoughts. Here's a practical tip. When a thought like "I'm not good enough" arises, add the phrase, "I notice I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough." This simple shift creates psychological distance. Imagine preparing for a presentation and thinking, "I'll mess this up." By reframing it as, "I notice I'm having the thought that I'll mess this up," you step back from the storm, observing it from a window instead of standing in the rain. Why does this matter? Because the thoughts you identify with shape your reality. If you believe every critical thought, you'll live as though it's true. But seeing thoughts as temporary weather patterns diminishes their power. Research on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy shows this approach can prevent depression relapse by breaking cycles of negative thinking. The key isn't asking, "Is this thought true?" but "Is this thought helpful?" By observing thoughts without attachment, their grip loosens. You're not the storm, you're the sky it passes through. Why negative thoughts stick around. That one critical comment from your boss replays in your mind all week. You try to shake it off, but it keeps returning, coloring your mood and self-perception. This isn't random, it's your brain's survival mechanism at work. Neuroscience reveals we're wired with a negativity bias, a tendency to prioritize potential threats. MIT research shows the brain processes negative stimuli faster and remembers it longer than positive information, which explains why that one comment feels so sticky. It's your brain trying to protect you. Picture your brain like a record player stuck on a single track. Each time a negative thought loops, "I messed up," "They don't like me," it deepens the groove, making it easier to replay. This is why one anxious thought can spiral into hours of rumination. Studies on neural plasticity confirm that repeated thoughts strengthen specific connections, while unused ones fade. Your brain reshapes itself based on what you focus on. Here's the paradox. The harder you try to stop a thought, the more attention you give it. Resisting "I'm not good enough" only reinforces that pathway. A Harvard study demonstrated this with a simple task. Participants were told not to think about a white bear and couldn't stop imagining it. Suppression backfires because avoiding a thought still activates it, keeping you stuck in cycles of worry and self-criticism. Negative thoughts also thrive in our language. Phrases like "I'm so stupid" or "this always happens" aren't harmless. They are judgments that reinforce mental patterns. The brain doesn't distinguish between literal truth and repetition. Say, "I can't handle this enough," and your neural networks organize around that belief. Cognitive therapy research shows that interrupting these grooves requires more than positive thinking. It demands awareness in the moment. Imagine this. A thought arises. "I'll never succeed." Your brain searches for evidence, ignoring contrary examples. Stress hormones like cortisol kick in, making the thought feel true physically and emotionally. But the problem isn't the thought itself, it's mistaking this internal process for reality. Mindfulness research shows that labeling thoughts, there's the I'm failing story, reduces their grip. Each time you observe without reacting, you weaken the groove, creating space for clearer signals. Over time, this shift changes how you relate to your thoughts, reducing their power. The silent listener behind thoughts. Here's the twist. If you're the one listening to your thoughts, who or what is doing the listening? Contemplative traditions like Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta highlight a key distinction: the content of thought versus the awareness perceiving it. Modern neuroscience struggles with this because awareness isn't measurable like brain activity, yet anyone can experience it. Think of a moment when you suddenly realized you were lost in thought, like snapping out of a daydream. Who noticed that shift? Research from Harvard Medical School sheds light on this. When people enter the observer state, simply noticing thoughts without engaging, the default mode network, the brain's self-referential system, quiets down. This suggests consciousness isn't tied to a single brain network, but exists as a backdrop to them all. It's like a movie screen. The scenes change, but the screen remains constant. Try this. Close your eyes and notice your thoughts. For most, there's an immediate shift, from being lost in thought to observing them. That shift reveals the gap between thinker and observer. The observer doesn't change. Whether you're noticing anger or joy, the awareness doing the observing stays the same. Studies on experienced meditators show they can maintain this perspective even in difficult situations, reducing emotional reactivity. Science struggles to locate this observer. Brain scans can track activity during specific thoughts, but awareness itself doesn't map to any single region. Some theories suggest consciousness might function like a field the brain accesses rather than produces. A study in Frontiers in Psychology likened it to a radio receiver tuning into consciousness, echoing ancient wisdom that the mind perceives thoughts but doesn't create them. The practical takeaway? Identifying as the observer loosens thought's grip. Instead of I am anxious, noticing I'm experiencing anxiety creates separation, reducing its power. This shift isn't mystical, it's available now. Next time you're caught in thought, pause and ask, who is aware of this? Wisdom from the thinkers who knew more. Carl Jung once wrote, "The psyche is not of today, its ancestry goes back many millions of years." He wasn't being poetic. His clinical work revealed patients dreaming of symbols from cultures they'd never encountered, suggesting that what we call our thoughts might not be ours at all. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious proposed that thoughts emerge from shared psychic layers deeper than personal experience. He noticed identical symbols appearing in dreams worldwide, patterns that couldn't be explained by individual lives. Alan Watts echoed this with his famous riddle, "Who is it that knows there is no ego?" This question exposes a paradox. If thoughts don't come from a solid self, then who's observing that realization? Both thinkers pointed to awareness as the ground of being, with thoughts passing through like weather patterns. This suggests that when you have a thought, you might tap into ancient shared patterns rather than create something entirely new. Similarly, research in transpersonal psychology reveals that people in deep meditative states or creative flow often describe feeling like a conduit rather than an author. Composers speak of melodies coming through them, while mathematicians describe proofs revealing themselves. A Princeton study analyzing creative breakthroughs found they share three qualities: suddenness, completeness, and a sense of reception rather than construction. Consider how thoughts appear throughout your day. The anxious ones looping about work, the sudden insights in the shower, the nostalgic memories surfacing while driving. They all share one quality. You didn't decide to think them. They arose on their own. Jungian analysts observe that recognizing this transpersonal dimension can reduce distress from negative thoughts. If a thought isn't yours, but something passing through consciousness, it loses its sting. The practical takeaway? Wisdom begins when we stop claiming every thought as ours and start discerning which to engage. As Watt said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The mind works best not when it struggles to produce thoughts, but when it's clear enough to discern which ones deserve attention. Tuning your mental receiver. If thoughts are frequencies your mind receives, then attention becomes your tuning dial. What you focus on determines which signals come through clearly and which remain as static. Think of your morning routine as setting the day's initial frequency. Scrolling through news alerts first thing, and you've tuned into anxiety. Spend 10 minutes in quiet reflection, and you might catch clearer signals all day. The challenge is maintaining clarity amid life's chaos. Meditation works like cleaning your receiver. When stress or fatigue builds, your ability to discern useful signals weakens. One study found just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice increased gray matter density in brain regions linked to attention. It's not about emptying your mind, but reducing interference so the strongest signals come through. Imagine trying to hear a distant radio station during a thunderstorm versus on a clear night. 3 techniques reliably shift your mental station. First, breath focus, quiet static. When anxious thoughts dominate, conscious breathing grounds your attention in the present. MRI scans show it decreases amygdala activation while strengthening prefrontal connectivity. Second, gratitude tunes higher bands. Regular appreciation practice changes what you notice. A UCLA study found that people who kept gratitude journals became more sensitive to positive information, effectively retuning their mental filters. Third, nature aligns with reception. Forest walks increase alpha brain waves, the same waves linked to relaxed, alert states conducive to insight. These methods recalibrate how your brain filters information. Negative bias acts like a faulty tuner, stuck on threat frequencies. Deliberate practices can shift it. Consider how a song might suddenly recall a forgotten memory. That memory wasn't lost, you just needed the right trigger. Similarly, breakthrough ideas often arrive when you stop straining for solutions and enter a receptive state. Archimedes' eureka moment came in a bath, not at his workbench. Practical adjustments make a difference. Digital minimalism studies show that limiting passive screen time reduces mental overload, allowing clearer signals. Single tasking creates coherence, while multitasking fragments attention. Neuroscience confirms that focused attention increases processing efficiency, explaining why flow states feel effortless yet productive. Your clearest thinking happens when you stop trying to think and start listening. Over time, deliberate practices make discernment automatic, like recognizing a favorite song through static after the storm clears. Here's the most freeing truth. You're not trapped by your thoughts. You're the vast space where they come and go. Next time a thought arises, pause and ask, is this my voice or just the station I'm picking up? Try this today. When a negative thought appears, say, I notice I'm receiving this thought, and watch what changes. This simple shift creates distance, revealing you're the awareness behind the mental noise. Thoughts will still come, but their power fades when you stop claiming them as yours. The real you isn't the thinker. It's the quiet presence that notices thinking happening. Rest in that space.